I mean, Charlie, if I sent you $15 in the mail, I think you could keep it.
All right, good to know.
Hello, I'm Colin,
And I'm Charlie.
and welcome to the C&C Talks podcast, episode 12 of season 3.
Just a reminder, we release episodes every week and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It's currently Monday, April 14th, 2024 at about 9 p.m. Pacific time. And we got a pretty busy episode this week, so let's get right into it with the beginnings of a conflict between Israel and Iran. Colin, what's new?
Well, I'd hardly call it the beginning of the conflict, Charlie. I mean,
Well, the
obviously,
beginning
there's,
of actual fighting between the two powers themselves. There's obviously the proxy war going on.
well, sure, but not only that, like roughly 2 weeks ago, and I don't think we ever covered it here on this podcast, but Israel did bomb the Iran's embassy in Syria, Charlie, which is just that's a really big deal. Generally considered a big no-no to go after another country's diplomats in a third country. Very, very much a no. So Iran has for a while been promising some sort of retaliation, and we finally did see that with a drone. They sent hundreds of drones to Israel for a drone strike. They were able, the U.S. and Israel were able to shoot almost all of these drones down. So that doesn't seem to really be a problem. It's not even clear that Iran really fully wanted this to be like a major attack. Could have just been seen more as a warning sign or some mild retaliation for this, essentially, just to just as a deterrent to Israel for doing stuff like that in the future. But I think really the big question now is what happens next. Because if I'm the US, right, I think that I want Israel to probably not go after Iran further, not escalate this conflict at this point. But I think that that's not necessarily the direction that Israel is going to go. That's not necessarily what Netanyahu wants. And all of a sudden, at that point, we have a big problem on our hands, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting point that you bring up. I don't think the U.S. wants an escalation any more than it already has. But then for the two powers that are already involved, I don't think Iran necessarily wants to do anything more with this. But it really just comes down to what does Israel do? Do they respond? What is it to this? Should they? Do they kind of have to? It depends. And also, how do other power? How does Hezbollah play into this? How does the Houthis in Yemen play into this?
Yeah, and then of course we already have the war going on with Israel in Gaza. But yeah, I agree. The U.S. definitely does not want Israel to go further. I also would agree with you. I don't think Iran really wants this to go any further either. I don't think it's to their interests to get involved in a major war with Israel and potentially bringing the United States into that, though. The United States going to war with Iran would be just an absolutely horrendous idea for the U.S. Really, at this point, I think Israel's driving this. Now, the U.S., I think, is going to do everything they possibly can to convince Israel to not go further. The question is, will Netanyahu still listen to that? And then let's also remember, if you listen to any of the GOP presidential debates in the fall, it seems like bombing Iran is a position that is very favorable with the GOP at the moment. So, what happens if Republicans retake power, specifically if Trump gets back into the White House at the beginning of 2025? How does that change things? Is it more likely that there's a full scale war with Iran?
Yeah, I think it makes it more likely, but considering that these events that you're suggesting could happen have yet to happen, it's really impossible to tell if that's something that would actually happen or not. But I think if Trump is reelected, considering that position in the GOP, I think escalation with Iran is more likely in that scenario.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. All right, let's move on to the state of Arizona, where it's apparently now 1864 in Arizona after the Arizona Supreme Court is enforcing an abortion law that was passed in Arizona in 1864. This is essentially a full and complete abortion ban in the state of Arizona, no exceptions for rape or incest. And this law is, I think it's particularly egregious that this is now being forced to be enforced in Arizona because when this law was passed, first of all, it was the middle of the Civil War. Arizona was split into two. There was the Confederate Arizona Territory and the Arizona Territory. But yeah, you heard me right. Territory. Arizona in 1864, Charlie, was not a state.
Yeah, it wasn't a
It
state
was a
until I believe.
territory.
Yeah, it wasn't a state until 1912, I believe.
Yeah, right around there. So this is apparently now just a law. We can just enforce laws that were written in 1864. And we're making laws about medical decisions now. And we're enforcing laws about medical decisions based on information we had in 1864. Why? I mean, I know why. Because the GOP will stop at nothing to block abortion, but that's the world right now. That's what Arizona's going through. And I think also, though, it really does show the power of elections because I think it was something like a couple hundred votes out of several million in 2022, a Democrat won the state attorney general's race in Arizona, now saying that they will not prosecute these cases. So that shows that elections do have big consequences. But this will also, I think, Charlie, have a big impact on elections, right? We've seen abortion rights hurt Republicans for a while, and now in one of the biggest swing states in the country heading into 2024, you have this issue staying like it's a very important issue to the voters. And this ruling, it came just a day after Donald Trump changed his position on abortion again. He's changed it something like a dozen times at this point, but he said now it should be left up to the states. Then the state rules on it in a way that, while favorable to Republicans, could really hurt them politically. And Carrie Lake, obviously one of the biggest figures in Republican politics, who had been touting this in 2022, this law that would come into effect if Roe v. Wade was overturned, now is trying to say that this law goes too far. So really interesting to see Republicans now trying to distance themselves from a law they support.
Yeah, and I think that is a really just a truly political move. I mean, elections coming up in November. As you said, abortion is really not a winning issue for them. Arizona is a critical swing state. So it doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of, obviously, the Supreme Court state Supreme Courts aren't supposed to be political, but they are.
Yeah, but it's also kind of hard to avoid at this point. That's kind of the world that we live in because they're elected positions. I mean, I'd
Yeah,
also say that the U.S. Supreme Court has become a political entity, but that's a whole nother discussion that we've discussed many times already,
but
and I'm sure we'll
the reason I bring
continue
this up,
to.
the reason I bring it up is because this is really not very good timing on Arizona's Supreme Court if they're particularly for the Republicans, is now they have to essentially either fight on a winning issue or switch their position on something only months before the elections.
Yeah, and look, let's be very clear. This is a law now that is supported by the majority of Republicans. They're all going to say that they think that this is going too far just because of politics, but this is the type of law that they would look to pass federally if they got the White House, the House, and the Senate. Right? They've been clear on that before. They've introduced federal abortion bans. They've introduced laws all around the country looking to ban abortion fully with no exceptions for rape or incest. So this is what they believe, and I don't see why anybody should believe now that just because they're saying, oh, this is going too far, that's actually what they believe when we have years of evidence to the contrary, Charlie.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there. Let's move on now to the Trump trial. One of his trials is this week. Colin, which one is it, and what do we know about this case before it goes to trial?
Yeah, this is the hush money case in New York. Obviously, a huge historic moment now. The first president or former president to ever be put on trial, on criminal trial, that is starting this week and will continue for likely a while. As of when we're recording this, jury selection, we believe, is going on. Trump has been firing off motions to dismiss the case, to get the judge to recuse herself, all sorts of things that are really just attempted delay tactics that the judge is just shooting down one by one in rapid succession. But yeah, this is a big historical moment where it's expected that Michael Cohen will testify at the trial on behalf of the prosecution, as well as Stormy Daniels, a few other witnesses. Unclear whether Trump will testify in his own defense at this trial. The defense has been having some troubles. Trump's legal team, as you might expect, is not good. I guess that's what happens when you don't pay your lawyers and they all end up being material witnesses in your future cases, is you just don't end up with the greatest of lawyers. They subpoenaed the wrong person last week, which seems to be a major mistake.
How does that even happen?
They sent the subpoena to a different person with the same name, requesting documents, and they sent him $15 to ship the documents to cover the cost of that, and he just decided to keep the $15 that Trump's legal team sent him, which actually seems pretty important given that Trump is looking for any possible dollar that he can now that his stock is tanking.
And
so
real quick,
he could use that.
Is the person he subpoenaed allowed to do that?
Yeah, why not? It's essentially they just randomly sent this dude $15, someone that has absolutely nothing to do with the case or anything. Why not?
I mean, yeah, good point.
I mean, Charlie, if I sent you $15 in the mail, I think you could keep it.
All right, good to know. We have some.
I didn't say I would do that.
We have another story that really blends the current events and sports. Former running back O.J. Simpson has died, and obviously people will remember for the football and for the other thing.
I think the other thing is the more important thing, right?
I think it is too.
I hear people argue, and I see why people argue. I think it's completely reasonable to argue essentially that in the immediate aftermath of someone's death, it's not really respectful to talk about their problems. And I think that if in general you have there's a decent person and then sure, it's good not to talk about the few bad things that they did because no human is perfect. But when you have people that are just bad people, just completely rotten, I think that it's good to acknowledge that that is their legacy. And for me, that is O.J. Simpson, right? Sure, O.J. Simpson was a great football player. Fine. He also murdered somebody, allegedly. And that is his legacy. That's what it is. I mean, I will argue there is much more to his legacy. I think that he really just fundamentally changed the way that the news business worked with how TV news covered his car chase and his trial. I think that was really just a monumental shift in towards the more reality TV type news that we get now. But I think primarily you have to remember him as a murderer, Charlie. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do, but I do think the point that you brought up about how the whole chase and things like that affected news media is very interesting to consider as well.
Yeah. All right, let's move on from that and It's an interesting discussion I want to have with you, Charlie, about the presidential election this year in regards to, are we going to have debates? The TV networks obviously want debates, but they want debates so much that they have sent a letter to the Biden campaigns and the Trump campaigns asking for debates. Letter was sent by ABC News, CBS News, NBC News, CNN, Fox News, the AP, C-SPAN, Univision, News Nation, NPR, PBS NewsHour, and USA Today. And per Brian Stelter, former CNN host and a correspondent at Vanity Fair, this is a snippet of the letter according to him. I'll read it for you. With the contours of the 2024 general election now coming into clear focus, we, the undersigned national news organizations, urge the presumptive presidential nominees to publicly commit to participating in general election debates before November's election. General election debates have a rich tradition in our American democracy, have played a vital role in every presidential election of the past 50 years, dating to 1976. In each of these elections, tens of millions have tuned in to watch the candidates debating side by side in a competition of ideas for the votes of American citizens. Since 1988, the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates has sponsored all presidential general election debates. The commission has previously announced dates, times, and eligibility criteria for 2024 debates. Though it's too early for invitations to be extended to any candidates, it is not too early for candidates who expect to meet the eligibility criteria to publicly state their support for and their intention to participate in the commission's debates planned for this fall. If there's one thing Americans can agree on during this polarized time, it's that the stakes of this election are exponentially high. Amidst that backdrop, there is simply no substitute for the candidates debating with each other and before the American people their visions for the future of our nation. So, Charlie, obviously a lot to unpack in that letter, but I think the number one thing is it's not like the news media here is this unbiased bystander. It directly benefits all of them to have debates, specifically the TV and radio stations who can make a lot of money by broadcasting those debates through ad money, of course. So that's number one, I think. But there's a couple of other things that stand out to me too, which is I don't think it's fair to say their visions for the future of our nation, because I think that implies here that both campaigns have a clear vision for the future of the nation. And it implies that we could actually get a real policy debate if we actually had a debate. And I just don't think that's true. I mean,
Colin, if you remember in 2020, those debates were just awful.
They were terrible to watch. Frankly, they were an embarrassment for the United States, especially the first one. The third one was slightly better as there was a mute button on the mics of the candidates that could be used if they went over time or were talking out of turn. So that helped with the second of them, but it was really ugly. And frankly, I don't think the American people learned anything from those debates, and I don't think the American people could learn that much from another debate. I think everybody, for the most part, already knows who these two candidates are. They know what they believe in. And in general, I don't think there's really any substance to be had in a debate, one that would really, I think, just be constant bickering and Trump talking about how much he was unfairly treated as Biden tried to actually have a serious policy debate, because Biden, whether you agree with his policy or not, is a serious candidate with serious ideas for the future of the country, and Donald Trump isn't. Donald Trump is running for president to stay out of prison. Now, Charlie, I do think I want to ask you, before we tackle the question of will there be debates at all, does it benefit each candidate to participate in the debate? If you were each of the candidates, what would you say? Debate or not debate?
I mean, I think this is interesting because if you look at the history behind it, as the letter suggests we do, going back to 76, there was if you actually look at it, there's some of these cases. I know there was a very famous one with Nixon where he just looked really awful.
Yeah.
It
Correct.
ended up,
Was that 60 though?
anyway. But I think if you're Joe Biden and Donald Trump, I wouldn't. I personally I don't think it's a good idea, particularly because I don't
For
think that
either of
either of
them?
them are going to be talking policy. I think them doing their own individual rallies is, I think, more effective for getting their messaging out than having to debate each other.
Yeah, I think for Joe Biden especially, it's probably not a good idea to debate. I think obviously Joe Biden is not the strongest debater in general. He used to be a lot better at it. He is he's never been the best at just at ad libbing though, which is what you have to do in a debate. Also, we've seen a trend. Incumbent presidents generally in their debate do not perform well. As we example A is Barack Obama, who had a very rough first debate against Mitt Romney. I just don't think that there's much to add for Biden. I don't think it's going to improve his standing at all. I think that you're not going to have a serious policy debate. Now, with Trump, I think it's more complicated. I think there are a lot more pros, but also a lot of cons because, on one hand, I don't think you want him getting attacked to his face about his crooked. I think that's probably a bad idea, especially you're going to actually have a serious journalist interviewing him about that, or not really interviewing, but asking him questions about that, instead of his handpicked Fox News person. So I think that's bad for him. But on the other hand, it does give him a chance to go on the attack directly against Biden. So I think I think it's less clear for Trump whether this would be good or bad. I don't think he does it. But so, Charlie, this brings up the final question. Will there be presidential debates in 2024, in your opinion?
I mean, given the power of how well these news media sources can get information out to people, I think we'll probably inevitably get either one or two, but I don't think that all of these networks are going to get one.
Well, they generally broadcast, I think, on like all the networks.
Oh, do they?
I think, yeah. So I think that if we get one, I think I don't think they're generally sponsored by a single network in the general election. In the primary, they definitely are, which is an interesting system that the parties
I
tend
think we'll
to
probably get
use.
at least
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that we're going to get a presidential debate this year. I don't think that really either campaign is going to see this as something that will benefit them. So I don't think this is going to be one candidate really wanting a debate and then the other just backing out. I think neither candidate's going to want a debate. Now they might both be trying to talk about how the other candidate didn't want to debate, which could be interesting, but I don't think we get them. Now, I think what might be interesting is I think it is possible that we see a vice presidential debate, but no presidential debates. Obviously, we don't know who Trump's running mate is going to be yet. So we don't know if they're going to be willing to debate, if they'd be a good debater or not. But I think if you're the Democrats and you're the Biden-Harris ticket, I think you really welcome the opportunity for a vice presidential debate. I think Kamala Harris has often gotten fairly bad rap for just being invisible. It's not true. She is out there doing events that just seem to not be covered. So she is doing quite a bit. And we know that back from 2020, she is an excellent debater. She did a great job against Mike Pence. She was arguably the best debater in the Democratic primary, with the possible exception of Elizabeth Warren. The main reason that her campaign didn't work out in 2020 was because it was just horrendously organized, and the people that were around her then were just not doing a good job at all of running her campaign. But her debate skills were not the reason that she lost. So I think a vice presidential debate is definitely possible.
All right, let's move on now to the solar eclipse. Guys, don't look directly at the sun.
Please don't. Did you get a chance to see the eclipse at all, Charlie?
No, I didn't. It was pretty cloudy over at my house. I didn't see a thing.
Yeah, exactly. We were in Seattle. It was not in the path of totality, but we were supposed to have been able to see a decent part of it, and we did not because clouds, which is always delightful. But no, it was just from the images I saw, it was a I mean, it is really, really cool. And I wish that I had seen one. And I think the next one in the continental United States is 2044. So 20 years to look forward and plan, get into a place where we can see the next one. All right, finally, Trump and Mike Johnson have unveiled a bill to stop non-citizens from voting. But Charlie, there's one problem here, and I think this is really the context that you have to provide anytime you're covering this story. That's already a law. Citizens cannot vote in U.S. elections. And it almost never happens that there's cases of fraud where they try to. That almost never happens. So really, at this point, it's just fear-mongering. And that's all it's ever been.
The House is wasting time doing something stupid again.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty common story, doesn't it?
Yes. It sounds like every week on the podcast.
Yeah, well, let's talk about what they had planned this week. It now sounds like Mike Johnson, he really just wants to focus on Israel aid this week. But this was originally the agenda in the House this week. This was supposed to be Home Appliances Week in the House, which is just insane. These were the bills that would be considered in Congress this week. The Hands Off Our Home Appliances Act, the Liberty and Laundry Act, the Clothes Dryers Reliability Act, the Refrigerator Freedom Act, the Affordable Air Conditioning Act, and the Stop Unaffordable Dishwasher Standards Act. What the heck is that, Charlie?
I don't know. It sounds like the agenda at the local Lowe's hardware store.
Yeah, I know. Congress has become so deeply unserious. All right, Charlie, it's time for your stat of the week. What have you got?
We've just finished up the NBA regular season. All 82 games have been played. And my question for you today is, which player played in the most games this season?
Was there only one player that played in all 82 games this year?
No, there's
actually, no. Did someone play in 83, if we're including the play-in final?
Someone played in 84.
Oh, because were they traded then? Mid-season?
Yes, I believe so.
I'm not saying Mikal Bridges, because he always plays, but he was not traded this year, I don't think, right?
No, he wasn't. Bridges did play all 82, but the answer was Buddy Hield of Toronto.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so he started on the
Toronto
Pacers,
and
right?
Philadelphia.
Was he not? He wasn't on the Pacers this year? Was that last year?
I believe that was last year, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's how much I've been following the NBA at large this year. We'll get to the play-in. We'll preview that in a little while coming up. But first, let's start with what we were not able to talk about last week, which is the men's March Madness final. Charlie, UConn taking down Purdue. What are your thoughts on this final?
This was a boring game. I didn't watch basically any of it. My dad was watching it, and he kept saying, "Oh, UConn's up by 15. Game's pretty much out of reach. Purdue hasn't been able to make a shot at all. Edie's looked really bad." That's all. That's basically all I heard for the entirety of the game.
Yeah, this was UConn's second straight title, and this is the argument that I would make about this year's UConn team. Right? It's widely acknowledged that this is one of the best teams in recent history, one of the best teams of all time. This 2024 UConn Huskies squad. But I would argue that this is a team that beat the system of March Madness. It beat the madness because this stuff like this isn't supposed to happen in March. UConn was the biggest consensus pick to win the national title I have ever seen. I have never seen so many people pick one team because March is wild. But I've also, ever since I started watching March Madness, which I think was 2018, I don't think that the most commonly picked champion has won until now. UConn, they didn't just win. It's not supposed to be easy to get through the NCAA tournament. It's supposed to be a tournament where upsets happen all the time, where any team is prone to one, right? Even if you don't think you see any team that can realistically beat this team, there's always one that shows up and gives them a run for their money. Even if they don't actually win, there's always a team that has a huge upset scare. That didn't happen with UConn. They won by something like a combined 140 points. That's averaging well over 20 a game. that is unheard of, right? They
It
were
really
in some
is.
trouble against Illinois. They were in some trouble against Illinois. What did they do? They pulled out a 30-0 run out of their back pocket to just completely put the game away. I get it. They didn't face the teams that we thought in the East region might give them the most trouble. They never got the chance to face Auburn because Auburn lost to Yale. They never got the chance to face Iowa State because Iowa State lost to Illinois. But if Yale and Illinois could beat Auburn and Iowa State, do we really think Auburn or Iowa State could have beaten UConn? I mean, Purdue, I think, was pretty obviously the second best team in this tournament. And look at what they did to Purdue. I mean, they made it close early, but it really felt like they never had much of a chance. It felt like they were just hanging on. I honestly, the only chance I saw at all in the second half for them to get back into the game whatsoever was when UConn had a bunch of players in foul trouble, and they were able to do essentially nothing to capitalize on that. This is one of the best teams of all time, Charlie.
Yeah, it really is.
All
All
right,
right, let's
moving
move on
on
to
to TV ratings. I want to talk about for a second. In the women's final, 18.7 million viewers. That is more than 4 million viewers more than the men's final, which I get. It's different because the men's final, it did start at 9:20 p.m. Eastern time on cable on the Monday night, which is a whole other discussion. But Charlie, that is just an absurd amount of viewers for the women's final. It roughly doubled the previous record for the women's final, which was set last year. That is so good for women's basketball. Obviously the Caitlin Clark effect, but we saw some games that did not involve Caitlin Clark averaging like 7 million viewers. So women's basketball has risen to new heights. Yes, because of Caitlin Clark, but also because the sport is it's really fun to watch right now. And it has something that the men's game in college basketball is lacking at the moment, which is like really big stars, I would say. And yeah, it's really exciting that this is something that's finally happening in women's sports.
Yeah, it really is. Impressive to see the rise of women's college basketball, and we'll see if it carries over into the WNBA season.
Yeah, which of course we'll talk about the WNBA draft next week. We will also next week give our mock draft for the NFL. So stay tuned for that as NFL draft week. Just a week away at this point. Charlie, NBA play-in is starting this week on Tuesday. The Western Conference on Tuesday, where it's Warriors, Kings, and Lakers, Pelicans. What are your thoughts on these Western Conference matchups? We'll start there, Charlie.
Okay, so I think the more interesting of the two matchups is that 7-8 matchup. Because the question is, I don't think that either of these two teams actually wants to win that game. Because if you're particularly if you're the Lakers, I think you would rather play Oklahoma City than Denver.
Yeah, so the Lakers are what?
Think
0-8 in their last 8 against Denver?
I believe so. I think the Pelicans will want to win that game because I think Zion, CJ McCollum match up somewhat better than LeBron and Anthony Davis against Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. And in the other game, Kings Warriors. I mean, I think whoever wins that's going to have a tough time beating the loser of Pelicans Lakers. I think the Pelicans Lakers are on a different level than both the Kings and the Warriors. The Warriors particularly, as a 10 seed, is going to be real tough in Sacramento. The Kings can get revenge for the playoff series last year, and then out east,
and the winner, maybe the winner of their owner gets to buy the A's. Maybe seems
sure.
like a fair trade off. I think quickly with the West. I agree the Lakers match up better with Oklahoma City than they do with Denver, but I think it's just too risky to like intentionally lose. I think you got to play to win. Now, it's funny is we actually saw Lakers at Pelicans on Sunday. Lakers won that game by quite a bit. So I don't know. I think I do like the Lakers in that. I think that the Warriors Kings matchup is good, but I actually do think that the winner of that game will match up pretty well against either opponent that they face, either the Pelicans or the Lakers. But yeah, let's go to the Eastern Conference now, Charlie. I believe it's Bulls Hawks in the 9-10 matchup and Sixers Heat in the 7-8 matchup. Your thoughts?
So I think this one's pretty interesting. As for that 9-10 matchup, I don't think it really matters because I think whoever wins that game is losing in the second game. I just think the Bulls and the Hawks are just not
Yeah.
good to beat whoever loses between Philly and Miami. But I think the interesting thing is if Philadelphia wins this game and Miami is the 8th seed, can they do it to Boston again?
I don't know. It's tough.
This Heat team isn't as
Boston's
good as they were
such a good
last year.
team.
Yeah, Boston got better
Correct.
and Miami got a little bit worse. But it would be really funny.
It absolutely would be.
Now, real
I
quick,
completely agree with you that neither the Bulls or Hawks will move on to the playoffs.
we did want to take a look at the other
Although,
two series in each conference that we hadn't mentioned that are not playing. The 4-5 and
sure.
3-6. In the West, you got Clippers and Mavericks and Timberwolves Suns. And in the East, we have Cleveland and Orlando. And then the other series is Milwaukee and Indiana. So before we start, let's just give a way too early Western and Eastern Conference Finals picks. Who do you got?
Let's see. In the West, Denver is going to make the Western Conference Finals, and I don't know. I don't really like any of the teams on the other side. Either Oklahoma City, who I think is really good but not experienced enough, or the Clippers or Mavericks, or whoever comes out of the play-in. I don't know. You know what? Give me the Warriors because I feel like it. And on the other side, give me Celtics Knicks. Actually, I think the Knicks can do it.
This is
Jalen Brunson, I think, is capable.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with putting both the Nuggets and the Knicks into the conference finals, and then I'm also going to throw. This is going to be a surprise. I think Miami is going to lose to Boston, but I think it's probably going to be in 6 or something like that. And I think Miami's going to lose to. I think Boston's going to lose to Orlando. I really
Huh.
like the Magic.
I really wanted to see that Magic Pacers series. I don't think we're getting that now unless somehow both of those teams get to the Eastern Conference Finals. I
I
gotta
think that
say now,
Milwaukee
the
series is going to be
Cavaliers
good though.
Magic, the which one?
Indiana and Milwaukee.
Yeah, that's a rematch of the of the in-season tournament semifinal from this season, as is I believe that Lakers Pelicans play-in game. But I gotta say the Cleveland Cavaliers Orlando Magic series, Charlie, is I think going to be dubbed the NBA TV series because that's where all of those games are going to end up. Although we do on Friday, April 26th, Charlie, and this is 100% real. There's going to be an NBA playoff game on ESPNU, not ESPN, not ESPN2, ESPNU.
There's only
Because
one platform there's only one thing I've ever seen on ESPNU, and it's sometimes Formula One practice and qualifying stuff is on ESPNU. I mean, that makes sense.
yeah,
But
yeah,
that's the only thing I've ever used that channel for.
yeah. So the reasoning behind it is there's other playoff games on ESPN, and ABC and ESPN2 are both going to be airing the second and third rounds of the NFL draft. But still, that feels like not great for the NBA, given ESPNU is not a widely distributed channel. So that's happening. Meanwhile, Charlie, we've got 1 week left in the NHL season, and most of the playoff spots up to this point are locked up. In fact, all of them are locked up in the Western Conference. In the Eastern Conference, there's still a bit of a battle in the Metropolitan Division for the third spot in the division. The Islanders, Capitals, and Flyers, and Penguins, I believe, could all get that third spot, and then the three of them that don't are going to be in a battle with the Red Wings for that final, for that final wild card spot, as the Tampa Bay Lightning have clinched the first of those in the Eastern Conference. But Charlie, we've got some projected matchups at this point. It looks like we're probably going to see a Winnipeg Colorado series, we're probably going to see an Edmonton Los Angeles Kings series, which I believe is a rematch of last year. We're going to see a Florida Panthers Toronto Maple Leafs series in all likelihood, though that's not officially confirmed yet. Florida could still pass Boston, but it would be difficult. What are your thoughts on those matchups that are likely going to take place, as well as Tampa Bay Boston?
Yeah, I think we have some potential for some good series there. I really like that Winnipeg Colorado series. I think that one could be really good.
Yeah, I like that one. I really like the Boston Tampa Bay series because that's a tale of two franchises that have been extremely good in the last few years. Florida, I think, could get back to the Stanley Cup Finals, and their road could. Well, it's going to start with eliminating Toronto. Okay, it's going to happen. They're the Leafs. I'm sorry, and I like whoever Dallas ends up playing out of the wild card in the Western Conference. Likely going to be Nashville, I think. Possibly going to be Vegas. I think Dallas could go far. I think Edmonton could actually go decently far, or Winnipeg. I think those are really the Canadians' only two hopes of getting a Stanley Cup, but I don't think that's happening either. All right, let's move on to European soccer, Charlie. As it was a wild weekend in the Premier League. Man City won, and they're now in first place because Liverpool and Arsenal dropped the ball. Arsenal, a big loss to Aston Villa, and Liverpool, a loss to Crystal Palace. So, Charlie, it really pains me to say, but there's a good chance that Man City is going to win another Premier League title this year.
We gotta stop them. We gotta
I
find a way
hate
to
it.
stop them. Yeah, I hate it too.
Yep. And in other European soccer news, we're on to the final leg in the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League, and there's some good matchups. Barcelona will play host to PSG Tuesday afternoon. Barcelona, they lead by 1 on the aggregate, so PSG needs to win outright in Barcelona in order to have a chance to move on. Dortmund and Atletico Madrid will also face off. Dortmund at home, needing to win by a goal at least. And then Munich and Arsenal will play on Wednesday. They're tied, and then Man City, Real Madrid also tied on aggregate. Also on Wednesday, but the other story in Europe, Charlie, that I think is really interesting to follow right now. Bayer Leverkusen has not lost a game this season.
Yeah, and they actually have locked up the Bundesliga title. Finally, someone, after I believe 11 straight championships, someone has finally beaten Bayern Munich.
Yeah, and they have a chance
winning
to
5-0. Yeah, they beat.
Yeah, they have a chance to become one of the best teams of all time. I think the one thing that could prevent them from doing that, they're not in the Champions League, so they do not have a chance to win that. But they could win everything else without dropping a game, which would just be an incredible accomplishment for them. Phenomenal team this year, somehow.
Yeah, the game winning, or the series, the title clinching win, the 5-0 yesterday against Werder Bremen to seal the cup. Let's move on now to. You want to talk about golf, Colin?
Sure. Let's talk about the Masters. Great week at Augusta National. Besides just awful wind conditions on Friday, Scotty Scheffler won by 4 strokes. Finished 11 under par, and we are now really seeing that he is just indisputably the number 1 golfer in the world. There was not a flaw in his game at Augusta National. He's, I believe, now come in top 2 in the last 4 tournaments that he's played in. Winning 3 of them, finished tied for second in the other. Just incredible stuff from Scotty Scheffler. Ludwig Oberg, though, he came in second in his first Masters ever. If he had won, that would have been just a truly incredible accomplishment for him. As DeChambeau faded after a great round on Thursday. Colin Morikawa looking very, very good first 3 rounds under under par, but then he was right there with Scheffler until a couple of double bogeys late on Sunday. Rough Sunday afternoon for him. And then Tiger Woods, again making the cut, but he broke the record for the most consecutive cuts made at the Masters. Now, this year, that's not that big of an accomplishment. The cut line was +6, a very, very rough Friday at Augusta. Almost nobody finished Friday under par. So that was a big accomplishment there. Great Masters. Next major is the PGA Championship, which is the next time that we will see the LIV guys and the PGA Tour guys compete against each other. But since the formation of LIV Golf, I'd say advantage to the PGA Tour players as the only one of them that has won a major since joining the LIV Tour has been Brooks Koepka. Obviously, Rahm won the Masters last year and has since joined LIV Golf. Same with Cam Smith winning the Open in 2022 and then later joining LIV Golf. But clearly at the moment, advantage to the PGA Tour guys in the majors, which makes sense because they're actually used to playing 72 holes and there actually being a cut line that you have to worry about. And the LIV Golf guys don't have to worry about how they actually do in tournaments because they're going to get the hundreds of millions of dollars from the Saudis either way. All right. Let's talk about some college basketball, some coaching changes, big coaching changes, as the legend Stanford women's basketball coach Tara Vanderveer retiring. Just, Charlie, one of the best careers of all time of any coach in the country, in any sport, really. And then Mark Pope, the BYU coach, he will become the next head coach of Kentucky. Remember, last week we were recording, we were kind of just seeing the news come in at the time that it seemed like John Calipari would be leaving Kentucky. So just a week later, now finding their new coach in Mark Pope, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
I think that is pretty interesting. Let's move on now to, do we have some more news on Shohei Ohtani?
Yes, we do have some news on Ohtani. His translator has been arrested. And this one, it really does seem at this point like Ohtani is the victim here. There's no evidence to suggest that he's anything else, and legal proceedings seem to show that Ipe, translator, had some major gambling issues. He lost $40 million. He, since 2021, had made $140 million to $180 million. That is so much money. Given that I think he said it came out that the most he ever gambled at once was something like $175,000, and most of his bets were much smaller bets. This is insane. This is just a truly absurd amount of gambling, like dozens of bets a day, possibly, for several straight years, which is just, it's a lot. And so clearly very addicted to gambling and somehow was able to impersonate Ohtani and steal money from his account and essentially wire it to himself, Charlie. So that's a pretty big story for Major League Baseball and not a good look on anybody, especially with how the league has embraced gambling.
Yeah, I mean, not a really good, not a really good look if you have translators spending mass amount of money and tricking betting companies into believing that you're a Major League Baseball player. Speaking of bad things in Major League Baseball, Colin, I know you have a rant prepared about this, so go ahead.
Yeah, look. Major League Baseball, there's a lot of things optically that are not going great for Major League Baseball, right? And so there's a lot that I could choose to rant about here, but I'm going to refrain for now from talking about how the A's are leaving Oakland and moving to Sacramento and then Las Vegas, right? We talked about that last week. For now, I'm going to refrain from talking about the jersey crisis, though that's also a disaster. Or, again, the fact that they've embraced gambling so much and ads on the level of ads on broadcast that it makes it completely unwatchable, frankly, really gross. Or, the fact that all of the pitchers are getting injured, or the fact that lots of players, some of the top players in the game, have major sexual misconduct allegations against them, including some which includes allegations against minors, which is not great. Or, anything going on at Major League Baseball upper leadership, such as the fact that MLB TV still has blackouts, which is the dumbest thing ever because you're actively encouraging people not to buy the product, which means that they're going to watch less games. Or, the fact that Robert Manfred, in his genius of marketing, thinks it's a great idea to play playoff games at 1 p.m. Eastern time on a weekday. So, I'm not going to talk about any of that right now. Instead, I'm going to talk about the umpiring crisis in Major League Baseball right now. I have umpired before. I have umpired Little League Baseball. And I will tell you right now that it is hard. I have, for the most part, umpired in the field, and that is difficult. And I have, on occasion, called balls and strikes behind the plate, and that is even harder. I am also not paid tens and likely hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. I have not had extreme levels of training. I have not had to work my way through the minor league system and had to essentially perfect my craft before I can get to the highest level of umpiring, which is Major League Baseball, nor do I have an interest in doing that. Every single umpire in Major League Baseball has had to go through all of that training, and yet they're still so bad at their jobs. And I'm going to zero in on one person in particular, and I think everyone knows who is the worst of the worst when it comes to umpires. Again, umpiring is hard, but it's so bad with Angel Hernandez that I'm pretty sure that I could stand behind the plate and close my eyes, and I would have a better chance at getting it right, because that's how frequently he gets them wrong. It feels like he's actually blind when he's umping a game behind the plate. And it happens in consequential situations, too. Just on, I think it was Friday night, in the Astros-Rangers game, Wyatt Langford was at the plate, bases loaded, 3 pitches, all of them outside the zone, all of them called for strikes, including the largest miss ever since Major League Baseball started providing ball tracking data on pitches. He's the absolute worst. And the fact that the umpires have such a strong union has prevented the league from firing him, and apparently the union won't let it happen either because they're worried he's going to sue them or something. I don't know. And should in theory benefit them to get out the one thing that makes them universally despised. The only thing every single baseball fan can agree on is what a horrible umpire Angel Hernandez is. Wants him doing their games unless they're just watching for. And there's nothing anyone can do or is willing to do about it at upper levels of Major League Baseball. It's completely insane. I mean, he is that bad. The rest of them, don't get me wrong, for the most part, are also really bad at their job. And look, umpires, take Pat Hoberg, for example. They're going to be wrong from time to time. There is human error. These are people. There's going to be errors. Major League Baseball has this great system that they've been testing out in the minor league that seems to be working really, really well, called the automatic ball strike challenge. All that happens is within 2 seconds of a pitch being thrown, a player, either a pitcher, catcher, or batter, can tap their helmet to challenge the call, and within 5 seconds, we know whether it was a ball or a strike. It's not a long replay. It's a very accurate replay overall. And they still won't use it in the majors, and it's unclear if they ever will use it in the majors because of the umpires union. So you can understand at this point why we can't even take any of this seriously, especially if there's going to be sport. You at least want the actual sport to be played accurately, which requires actually fair calls to be made, right? Because sometimes you just have terrible pitchers that are being completely bailed out by terrible umpires, and then it feels like there's going to be people that get in trouble with gambling, and because of that. And of course, the league has to embrace gambling to the level that they do so much that there's now games where the gambling odds are displayed live on the screen so that you can live bet the game while watching it. What are we doing here, Charlie?
Yeah, I think very well said.
All right. Any other comments this episode?
No, I think that'll do it.
All right. Thanks for listening to the C&C Talks podcast. Make sure to subscribe. Episodes coming out every single week, wherever you listen to your podcast. Our website, cctalks.com, has everything you need to know about the show. And you can call us with your questions at 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. And you can follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast. And follow Charlie at CC Talks Charlie. And join our Discord server at cctalks.com/Discord. All this information and more is in the description below. But for now, for our producer Morris and our production designer Zach, I'm Colin.
I'm Charlie, and we'll see you next week.